Chapter 26 of Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mary Anderson. Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm by Kate Douglas Wiggin. Chapter 26 Over the Teacups. The summer term at Wareham had ended, and Huldah Meserve, Dick Carter, and Living Perkins had finished school, leaving Rebecca and Emma Jane to represent Riverboro in the year to come. Delia Weeks was at home from Lewiston on a brief visit, and Mrs. Robinson was celebrating the occasion by a small and select party, the particular day having been set because strawberries were ripe and there was a rooster that wanted killing. Mrs. Robinson explained this to her husband, and requested that he eat his dinner on the carpenter's bench in the shed, as the party was to be a ladies' affair. "All right, it won't be any loss to me," said Mr. Robinson. "Give me beans, that's all I ask. When a rooster wants to be killed, I want somebody else to eat him, not me." Mrs. Robinson had company only once or twice a year, and was generally much prostrated for several days afterward, the struggle between pride and parsimony being quite too great a strain upon her. It was necessary, in order to maintain her standing in the community, to furnish a good set out, yet the extravagance of the proceeding goaded her from the first moment she began to stir the marble cake to the moment when the feast appeared upon the table. The rooster had been boiling steadily over a slow fire since morning, but such was his power of resistance that his shape was as firm and handsome in the pot as on the first moment when he was lowered into it. "He ain't going to give up," said Alice, peering nervously under the cover, "and he looks like a scarecrow." "We'll see whether he gives up or not when I take a sharp knife to him," her mother answered. "And as to his looks, a platter full o' gravy makes a sight o' difference with old roosters. And I'll put dumplings round the aidge. They're terrible fillin', though they don't belong with boiled chicken." The rooster did indeed make an impressive showing, lying in his border of dumplings, and the dish was much complimented when it was borne in by Alice. This was fortunate, as the chorus of admiration ceased abruptly when the ladies began to eat the fowl. "I was glad you could get over to Huldie's graduation, Delia," said Mrs. Meserve, who sat at the foot of the table and helped the chicken, while Mrs. Robinson poured coffee at the other end. She was a fit mother for Huldah, being much the most stylish person in Riverboro. Ill health and dress were indeed her two chief enjoyments in life. It was rumored that her elaborately curled front piece had cost $5, and that it was sent into Portland twice a year to be dressed and frizzed, but it is extremely difficult to discover the precise facts in such cases, and a conscientious historian always prefers to warn a too credulous reader against imbibing as gospel truth something that might be the basest perversion of it. As to Mrs. Meserve's appearance, have you ever in earlier years sought the comforting society of the cook and hung over the kitchen table while she rolled out sugared gingerbread? Perhaps then, in some unaccustomed moment of amiability, she made you a dough lady, cutting the outline deftly with her pastry knife, and then at last placing the human stamp upon it by sticking in 2 black currants for eyes. Just call to mind the face of that sugared gingerbread lady, and you will have an exact portrait of Huldah's mother. Miss Peter Meserve, she was generally called, there being several others. "How'd you like Huldie's dress, Delia?" she asked, snapping the elastic in her black jet bracelets after an irritating fashion she had. "I thought it was about the handsomest of any," answered Delia, "and her composition was first rate. It was the only real amusin' one there was, and she read it so loud and clear we didn't miss any of it. Most of the girls spoke as if they had hasty pudtin' in their mouths." "That was the composition she wrote for Adam Ladd's prize," explained Mrs. Meserve. and they do say she'd 'a' come out first, 'stead o' fourth, if her subject had been different. There was 3 ministers and 3 deacons on the committee, and it was only natural they should choose a serious piece. Hers was too lively to suit 'em." Huldah's inspiring theme had been "boys," and she certainly had a fund of knowledge and experience that fitted her to write most intelligently upon it. It was vastly popular with the audience, who enjoyed the rather cheap jokes and allusions with which it coruscated, but judged from a purely literary standpoint, it left much to be desired. Rebecca's piece wasn't read out loud, but the one that took the boys' prize was. Why was that?" asked Mrs. Robinson. "Because she wasn't graduatin'," explained Mrs. Cobb, "and couldn't take part in the exercises. It'll be printed with Herbert Dunn's in the school paper." "I'm glad o' that, for I'll never believe it was better'n Huldah's till I read it with my own eyes. It seems as if the prize ought to 'a' gone to one of the seniors." "Well, no, Marthy, not if Lad offered it to any of the 2 upper classes that wanted to try for it," argued Mrs. Robinson. "They say they asked him to give out the prizes, and he refused up and down. It seems odd, his bein' so rich and travelin' about all over the country, that he was too modest to get up on that platform." "My Huldy could 'a' done it, and not winked an eyelash," observed Mrs. Meserve complacently, a remark which there seemed no disposition on the part of any of the company to controvert. "It was complete, though, the governor happenin' to be there to see his niece graduate," said Delia Weeks. "Land! He looked elegant. They say he's only 6 feet, but he might 'a' been 16, and he certainly did make a fine speech." "Did you notice, Rebecca, how white she was, and how she trembled when she and Herbert Dunn stood there while the governor was praisin' 'em? He'd read her composition, too, for he wrote the Sawyer girls a letter about it." This remark was from the sympathetic Mrs. Cobb. "I thought 'twas kind o' foolish, his makin' so much o' her, when it wa'n't her graduation," objected Mrs. Meserve, "layin' his hand on her head and all that, as if he was a pope pronouncin' benediction. But there, I'm glad the prize come to Riverboro, at any rate, and handsomer one never was give out from the Wareham platform. I guess there ain't no end to Adam Ladd's money. The $50 would 'a' been good enough, but he must needs go and put it into those elegant purses." "I set so fur back I couldn't see 'em fairly," complained Delia, "and now Rebecca has taken hers home to show her mother." "It was kind of a gold net bag with a chain," said Mrs. Perkins, "and there was 5 $10 gold pieces in it. Herbert Dunn's was put into a fine leather wallet." "How long is Rebecca going to stay at the farm?" asked Delia. "Till they get over Hannah's bein' married, and get the house to runnin' without her," answered Mrs. Perkins. "It seems as if Hannah might 'a' waited a little longer. Aurelia was set against her goin' away while Rebecca was at school, but she's obstinate as a mule, Hannah is, and she just took her own way in spite of her mother. She's been doin' her sewin' for a year, the awfullest coarse cotton cloth she had, but she's nearly blinded herself with fine stitchin' and rufflin' and tuckin'. Did you hear about the quilt she made? It's white, and has a big bunch o' grapes in the center, quilted by a thimble top. Then there's a row of circled borderin' round the grapes, and she done them the size of a spool. The next border was done with a sherry glass, and the last was a port glass, and all outside o' that was solid stitchin' done in straight rows. She's goin' to exhibit it at the county fair. She'd better 'a' been takin' in sewin' and earnin' money, 'stead o' blindin' her eyes on such foolishness as quilted counterpane," said Mrs. Cobb. "The next thing you know, that mortgage will be foreclosed on Miss Randall, and she and the children won't have a roof over their heads." "Don't they say there's a good chance of the railroad goin' through her place?" asked Mrs. Robinson. "If it does, she'll get as much as the farm is worth and more. Adam Ladd's one of the stockholders, and everything is a success he takes holt of. They're fightin' it in Augusty, but I'd back Ladd agin any o' them legislators if he thought he was in the right." "Rebecca'll have some new clothes now," said Delia, "and the land knows she needs 'em. Seems to me the Sawyer girls are gettin' turrible near." "Rebecca won't have any new clothes out o' the prize money," remarked Mrs. Perkins, "for she sent it away the next day to pay the interest on that mortgage." "Poor little girl!" exclaimed Delia Weeks. "She might as well help along her folks as spend it on foolishness," affirmed Mrs. Robinson. "I think she was mighty lucky to get it to pay the interest with. But she's probably like all the Randalls. It was easy come, easy go with them." "That's more than could be said of the Sawyer stock," retorted Mrs. Perkins. "Seems like they enjoyed savin' more'n anything in the world, and it's gainin' on Mirandy since her shock." "I don't believe it was a shock. It stands to reason she'd never 'a' got up after it and been so smart as she is now. We had 3 o' the worst shocks in our family that there ever was on this river, and I know every symptom of 'em better'n the doctors." And Mrs. Peter Meserve shook her head wisely. "Mirandy's smart enough," said Mrs. Cobb, "but you notice she stays right to home, and she's more close mouthed than ever she was. Never took a mite o' pride in the prize, as I could see, though it pretty nigh drove Jeremiah out o' his senses. I thought I should 'a' died o' shame when he cried 'Hooray!' and swung his straw hat when the governor shook hands with Rebecca. It's lucky he couldn't get fur into the church and had to stand back by the door, for as it was he made a spectacle of himself. My suspicion is," and here every lady stopped eating and sat up straight, "that the Sawyer girls have lost money. They don't know a thing about business, and never did, and Mirandy's too secret and contrary to ask advice. The most of what they've got is in government bonds, I always heard, and you can't lose money on them. Jane had the timber land left her, and Mirandy had the brick house. She probably took it awful hard that Rebecca's $50 had to be swallowed up in a mortgage 'stead of goin' toward school expenses. The more I think of it, the more I think Adam Ladd intended Rebecca should have that prize when he gave it." The mind of Huldah's mother ran toward the idea that her daughter's rights had been assailed. "Land, Marthy, what foolishness you talk!" exclaimed Mrs. Perkins. "You don't suppose he could tell what composition the committee was going to choose? And why should he offer another $50 for a boy's prize if he wasn't interested in helpin' along the school? He's give Emma Jane about the same present as Rebecca every Christmas for 5 years. That's the way he does. Sometime he'll forget one of 'em and give to the other, or drop 'em both and give to some new girl," said Delia Weeks, with an experience born of 50 years of spinsterhood. "Like as not," assented Mrs. Peter Meserve, "though it's easy to see he ain't the marryin' kind. There's men that would marry once a year if their wives would die fast enough, and there's men that seem to want to live alone. If Ladd was a Mormon, I guess he could have every woman in North Riverboro that's a suitable age, accordin' to what my cousins say," remarked Mrs. Perkins. "'Tain't likely he could be kitched by any North Riverboro girl," demurred Mrs. Robinson. "Not when he prob'ly has the pick o' Boston. I guess Marthy hit it when she said there's men that ain't the marryin' kind." "I wouldn't trust any of 'em when Miss Right comes along," laughed Mrs. Cobb genially. "You never can tell what and who's goin' to please 'em. You know Jeremiah's contrary horse, Buster? He won't let anybody put the bit into his mouth if he can help it. He'll fight Jerry, and he'll fight me, till he has to give in. Rebecca didn't know nothin' about his tricks, and the other day she went into the barn to hitch up. I followed right along, knowing she'd have trouble with the head stall, and I declare if she wa'n't pattin' Buster's nose and talkin' to him, and when she put her little fingers into his mouth he opened it so fur I thought he'd swallow her for sure. He just smacked his lips over the bit as if 'twas a lump o' sugar. 'Land, Rebecca,' I says, 'how'd you persuade him to take the bit?' 'I didn't,' she says. 'He seemed to want it. Perhaps he's tired of his stall and wants to get out in the fresh air.'" CHAPTER 27